Odyssey, Book 3. The sun rose from the still, beautiful water into the bronze sky to shine upon the gods, and upon men who die on the life-giving earth. The ship came to Pylos, Nestor's great city. On shore, black bulls were being sacrificed to the blue-maned lord of the sea. 9 companies of 500 men were each assigned 9 bulls for sacrifice. They had just tasted the innards and were burning the thigh pieces for the god when the ship pulled in to shore. The crew furled the sail, moored the vessel, and disembarked. Telemachus stepped off the ship behind Athena, and the goddess, eyes glinting, said to him, "There is no need to feel embarrassed, Telemachus, not at all. This is why you have sailed the sea, to get news of your father, to find out his fate, and where the earth conceals him. Come on now, go straight up to Nestor. Let's see what he knows. Ask him yourself, so he'll tell you the truth. Not that he would lie, he's very wise." And Telemachus, taking in a breath, "How should I go up to him, Mentor, and what should I say? I'm not used to making clever speeches, and besides, a young man just doesn't question an elder." Athena's eyes glinted in the morning light. "You'll come up with some things yourself, Telemachus, and a god will suggest others. I do not think you were born and bred without the god's goodwill." Thus Pallas Athena. She led the way quickly, and the man followed in the deity's footsteps. They came to the great company of Pylians, and there found Nestor sitting with his sons. All round him were men preparing for the feast, skewering meat on spits and roasting it, and when they saw the new arrivals, they all crowded around, clasping their hands in welcome and inviting them to sit down. Nestor's son, Pisistratus, was first, taking them both by the hand and having them sit down at the feast, on soft fleeces spread on the sandy beach beside his father and Thrasymedes his brother. Then he gave them servings of the inner organs and poured wine into a golden cup. Passing it on to Pallas Athena, he spoke directly to her, the daughter of Zeus who wields the aegis. "Pray now, stranger, to Lord Poseidon, for it is his feast you have happened upon. When you have poured libations and have said the ritual prayers, pass the cup of sweet wine on to your friend, so that he too may pour, since I have no doubt he also prays to the gods. All men have need of the immortal gods, but he is younger than you, about my age, so to you I will give the golden cup first." He spoke and handed her the cup of sweet wine, and Athena rejoiced at his respect for custom in handing her the golden cup first. Without hesitation she prayed to Poseidon, "Hear me, Poseidon, who laps all the earth, and do not refuse to fulfill my prayer. Bring renown to Nestor first and his sons, and grant your grace to all the men of Pylos, in return for this glorious sacrifice. And grant also to Telemachus and to me a safe return home, having accomplished all that we came for in our swift black ship." Thus Athena's prayer, which she herself granted. Then she gave Telemachus the beautiful cup, and Odysseus's true son prayed the same way. The meat was roasted now. They drew it off the spits and served it up for the feast. When they had eaten and drunk all that they wanted, Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, spoke. "It is seemlier to ask our guests who they are, now that they have enjoyed some food with us. Who are you, strangers? Where do you sail from? Are you on some business, or are you adventurers wandering the seas, risking your own lives and bringing trouble to men in foreign lands?" Telemachus felt a sudden urge of courage, implanted in his heart by Athena herself, so that he would inquire about his absent father, and win for himself a name among men. "Nestor, son of Neleus, glory of the Achaeans, you ask where we are from, and I will tell you. We have come from Ithaca, under Mount Neon, but my business is my own, not the Ithacans. I come for news of my father, any news at all about noble Odysseus, who once, they say, fought beside you and sacked the city of Troy. We have heard where each of the other heroes who fought the Trojans met his bitter end, but Zeus has placed Odysseus's death beyond hope of knowing. No one can say exactly where Odysseus died, whether it was on land, overcome by enemies, or on the deep sea in Amphitrite's waves, and so I am at your knees to see if you can tell me how my father met his end, whether you saw it with his own eyes, or heard about it from someone else, some wanderer. He was born to sorrow, more than any man on earth. And do not, out of pity, spare me the truth, but tell me whatever you have seen, whatever you know. I beseech you, if my father, noble Odysseus, ever fulfilled a promise he made to you in the land of Troy, where the Achaeans suffered, remember it now, and tell me the truth." And Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, answered, "Ah, my friend, you bring to my mind the sorrow we bravely endured in that land, heroes all, and the sons of heroes. Everything we suffered on the misty sea, looting and plundering wherever Achilles led, and all of our battles round Priam's great city, where our best were killed. There lies Ajax, dear to Ares, there great Achilles, there Patroclus, like a god in council, there my own dear son Antilochus, strong and swift, a peerless warrior. And there were many more losses we suffered. No mortal man could recount them all. Even if you stayed for 5 or 6 years and wanted to hear the whole tale of woe, you would return home weary before the end. For 9 years we devised all sorts of strategies to bring Troy down, which the son of Cronus scarcely brought to pass. In that effort no man could match Odysseus for cunning. Your father was the master of all the strategies. If indeed you are his son, I am amazed as I look upon you. The way you speak is very much like him. One would not think a younger man could speak so appropriately. Now all that time Odysseus and I never disagreed in assembly or council. We had one heart, and with our wisdom we advised the Argives on the best course to take. But when we had sacked Priam's tall town, Zeus planned in his heart a bitter journey home for the Greeks, who were not all prudent or just, which is why the wrath of the gray-eyed one brought many of them to an evil end. She caused a quarrel between Atreus' 2 sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus. It happened this way. These two called an assembly of the entire army in a reckless manner towards sunset and all out of order. We had all been drinking. They made their speeches and announced their purpose in assembling the troops. Menelaus wanted the entire army to set their sights homeward, to begin shipping out on the open sea. But this was not at all to Agamemnon's liking. He wanted to delay their departure and offer formal sacrifice to appease the wrath of Athena. The fool! He had no idea she would never relent. The minds of the Eternal Ones are not quickly turned. So these two stood there exchanging insults, and the soldiers rose up with one huge roar and took sides. We spent that night nursing our resentment against each other, for Zeus was bringing on our doom. At dawn, some of us hauled our ships to the bright water and loaded on board our goods and our softly belted women. Half of the army held back, remaining with King Agamemnon, son of Atreus, but half of us embarked and launched our ships, which pulled away swiftly, for some god had made the teeming water smooth as glass. We pulled in to Tenedos and offered sacrifice, eager to reach home, but Zeus held firm against our immediate return and stirred up still more dissension. Some now turned back their curved ships, following Odysseus, a wise leader with a flexible mind, out of respect for Lord Agamemnon. But I fled on with all my ships, for I knew that Zeus had evil in mind. Diomedes also got his men out then, and Menelaus brought up the rear. He caught up with us in Lesbos, and as we were debating the long journey ahead, whether we should sail above rugged Chios and on to Pisiria, keeping Chios on our left, or go below Chios past windy Mimas, we asked the god to give us a sign, and he showed us one, telling us to cut through the sea straight to Euboea, the sooner to get ourselves out of danger. A shrill wind rose up and started to blow, and the ships flew over the teeming brine. We put in at Gerestus that night, and with all that water behind us, we sacrificed many bulls to Poseidon. On the 4th day, Diomedes made Argos, but I held on toward Pylos, and the wind did not die down once since it began to blow. And so I came home, dear child, knowing nothing of who survived and who was lost. But what I have heard sitting here in my halls, you too shall hear, as is only right. The Myrmidons, they say, made it safely home, led by the son of great-souled Achilles. Philoctetes, too, and Idomeneus brought back to Crete all of his men who survived the war. He lost none at sea. Of Agamemnon you have already heard. Far off though you be, how he came home, and how Aegisthus plotted his grisly death and then paid for it in a horrible way. How good it is for a son to be left when a man dies. Agamemnon's son avenged his death, killing his murderer, the treacherous Aegisthus. You too, my friend, for I see that you are handsome and tall, should be brave and strong, and win a name for yourself. And Telemachus in his clear-headed way, Nestor, son of Neleus, glory of the Achaeans, truly Orestes was a son who took vengeance, and the Achaeans will spread his fame to future generations. I wish the gods would clothe me in such strength that I might take vengeance on the suitors for their transgressions against me. They are violent and malicious men, but the gods have spun into the web of my life no such happiness for me or my father, and so I will simply have to endure. Nestor the Gerenian horseman answered, Now that you've mentioned it, I recall hearing that a crowd of suitors for your mother's hand, uninvited by you, are causing you trouble. Why do you put up with this? Has some god turned the townspeople against you? Who knows but that Odysseus may come some day, alone or with an army, and make them pay in blood? Ah, if only grey-eyed Athena chose to love you the way she did glorious Odysseus in the land of Troy. I have never seen a god show love so openly as Athena did to him. You could see her standing at his side. If she would choose to love you like that and take care of you, some of those suitors might forget about marriage. And Telemachus answered him, I do not think, sir, this will ever happen. The very thought amazes me. It is too much to hope for, even if the gods willed it. Then Athena, eyes flashing, put in, Telemachus, what a thing to say! It is easy for a god to bring a man safely home, even from far away. And speaking for myself, I would rather suffer on my homeward journey than be killed at my hearth, as Agamemnon was, by the treachery of Aegisthus and of his own wife. But even the gods cannot ward off death, the great leveler from a man they love, not when destiny comes to lay him low. And Telemachus answered him, Mentor, let us speak of this no longer, for all our grief. He cannot return. The gods have already devised his death. But now I have another question for Nestor. Steeped as he is in knowledge and wisdom, he has been king for 3 generations, and has the look of an immortal god. Nestor, son of Neleus, tell me this. How was Agamemnon, son of Atreus, slain? Where was Menelaus? How could Aegisthus dare to plot the murder of a king, a man far more powerful than he himself was? Was Menelaus not in Argos? And did his absence encourage Aegisthus to commit the murder? And Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, well then, my child, I will tell you all. You yourself have guessed what would happen if Atreus' son, red-haired Menelaus, had come back from Troy and found Aegisthus still alive in his halls. His dead body would never have been buried in earth. Dogs and birds would have ripped it apart as it lay on the plain far from the city. Nor would any Greek woman have wept for him. So monstrous was the crime he planned and committed. While we toiled and sweated over there in Troy, he relaxed in a corner of blue-grass Argos, sweet-talking the wife of Agamemnon, noble Clytemnestra. At first she refused the whole sordid affair. She had good sense, and with her was a singer whom Agamemnon, when he left for Troy, had strictly ordered to guard his wife. But when the gods doomed her to be undone, Aegisthus took the singer of tales to a desert island and left him there for the dogs and birds, and he led her off just as willing as he was to his own house. Many an ox's thigh he burned on the altars, many an offering he made of tapestries and gold when he accomplished the great deed he had never hoped in his heart to achieve. Menelaus and I were sailing then on our way back from Troy, the best of friends. But when we came to holy Sunium, the Cape of Athens, Phoebus Apollo shot Menelaus's pilot with his arrows, killing him softly as he held the tiller of the speeding ship. Phrontis his name, the best rough-weather pilot in all the world. So Menelaus stopped, eager though he was to press on, and gave his comrade a funeral. When he got his ships on the deep purple again, he made good time to Malea's steep height. But then Zeus put trouble in his way. Shearing blasts of shrill winds down from the sky, and the waves swelled to the size of mountains. Then he split the fleet in 2, bringing some to the part of Crete where the Sidonians live, near the Iardanus River. There's a smooth cliff sheer to the misty sea on the border of Corton, where the southwest wind drives huge waves against the headland on the left, toward Phaestus, the only breakwater in a small rock offshore. So some of the fleet came there. The men barely escaped with their lives, but the ships were broken to pieces against the reef. 5 other black ships, though, were blown all the way to Egypt, and Menelaus wandered up and down the coast with his ships, a stranger in a strange land, amassing a fortune in gold and goods. Aegisthus, meanwhile, was working his evil at home. Having killed the son of Atreus and subdued the people, he reigned for 7 years in gold-crusted Mycenae. In the 8th year, though, he met his doom in the person of Orestes, come back from Athens. Orestes killed his father's murderer, the treacherous Aegisthus, and having killed him, invited all the Argives to a funeral feast for his hateful mother and her craven lover. On that very day Menelaus arrived, bearing all the treasures his ships could hold. So don't you wander long from home, my friend, leaving your wealth behind, and in your house insolent men who might divide up your goods while you are gone on a useless journey. Still, I think you should visit Menelaus, for he has just lately returned from abroad, from a country no one would hope to return to once a storm has driven him off course, into a sea so wide that not even migrating birds make the trip more than once a year. So great is that sea and so terrible. So then go off now with your ship and your crew. Or if you would rather travel by land, we have chariots and horses at your disposal. My sons are at your service, ready to guide you to gleaming Lacedaemon, where Menelaus lives. Beseech him yourself, so he'll tell you the truth. Not that he would lie, he's very wise. The sun set on his words, and darkness came on. Athena's eyes flashed gray as she said, You have told the tale well, old man, but come, cut the tongues and mix the wine so we can pour libations to Poseidon and the other gods, and then think of sleep. It is late. Twilight has faded to dark, and it is not right to linger at feasts of the gods. Thus Zeus's daughter, and they did as she said. Heralds poured water over their hands, and youths filled bowls to the brim with drink, and served it to all, first pouring into each cup a few drops for libation. They cut the tongues, threw them on the fire, and, standing up in turn, poured libations upon them. Having done so, and having drunk to their heart's content, Athena and godlike Telemachus both started to head for their hollow ship, but Nestor prevailed upon them to stay. God forbid you should go to your ship, as if I were poor and didn't have enough cloaks and blankets for myself and my guests to sleep softly upon. I have plenty of cloaks and blankets, and Odysseus' son shall never lie down on the deck of a ship while I am alive, or any child of mine is left in the halls, to entertain strangers who come to my house. And Athena, her eyes flecked with dark gold, Well spoken, old friend, and Telemachus would do well to accept your invitation. It is better that way, so he will go with you to sleep in your house, but I will go back to the black ship and have a word with the crew to raise their spirits. I am the only older man among them. They are all youngsters, Telemachus' age, and sail with us as friends. I will spend this night down there by the ship, but at dawn I am off to the Cauconians to collect an old debt, and not a small one at that, but send this young man on his way in a chariot, and send your son with him, and the fastest, strongest horses you have. Thus Athena, her eyes flashing in the dark. And as she left, they saw only a vulture beating its long, dusky wings. Their jaws dropped, and the old man could scarcely believe his eyes. He grabbed Telemachus' hand and said to him, If you have gods as escorts when you are so young, I do not think you will turn out badly at all. This was no other of the Olympian gods but the daughter of Zeus, Tritogenia, most glorious Athena, who also honored your noble father among the Argive forces. Be gracious, lady, and grant me renown, me, my sons, and my venerable wife, and in return I will sacrifice to you a yearling heifer, broad of brow and unbroken, which no man has ever led beneath the yoke, and I will plate her horns with gold for sacrifice. Thus Nestor, and Pallas Athena heard his prayer. Then the old Gerenian horseman led his sons and daughters' husbands to his beautiful palace, where they sat down in rows on benches and chairs. The housekeeper opened a jar of wine 11 years old. The old man mixed a bowl of this sweet wine, and as he poured libations, he prayed over and over to Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who holds the aegis. When they had all poured libations and drunk wine to their heart's content, they went home to their houses to take their rest. But Nestor told Telemachus to sleep under the echoing portico on a corded bed next to Pisistratus, a good man with a spear, and the only of Nestor's sons still unmarried. Nestor himself slept in an inner room with his wife, the lady of the house, beside him. As soon as dawn appeared in the sky, Nestor, the Gerenian horseman, rose and went to sit on the polished stones outside his high doors, the white stones glistening with oil, upon which of old Neleus would sit, like a god in council. Neleus had met his fate long ago, and gone down to Hades' undergloom, and now upon these stones in his turn sat Nestor of Gerenia, holding a scepter. His sons came out and gathered about him, Echephron and Stratius and Perseus, Aretus and godlike Thrasymedes, and as the sixth, the hero Pisistratus, and they brought godlike Telemachus and had him sit beside Gerenian Nestor, who then spoke. Quickly now, my sons, that I may propitiate Athena, who came to me at the feast of the god, as clear as day. One of you go to the plain for a heifer, and have the cowherd drive her here speedily. Let another go to the black ship of great-hearted Telemachus, and bring his crew, leaving only 2 behind. And someone go fetch the goldsmith Laerces, to plate the horns of the heifer with gold. The rest of you stay here, and have the serving women prepare a feast throughout our glorious halls, and bring seats, plenty of logs, and fresh water. Thus Nestor and they all set to work. The heifer came from the plain, and from the sailing ship came Telemachus's crew. The smith came with the tools of his trade, a bronze hammer, an anvil, and a pair of well-made tongs, with which he wrought gold, and Athena came to accept the sacrifice. Nestor, the old charioteer, gave the smith gold, and the smith worked it and leafed it around the heifer's horns, to make the goddess rejoice at the offering. Stratius and Cepharon led the heifer up by the horns, and Aretus came from the chamber, carrying water for their hands in a basin, embossed with flowers. In his other hand he held a basket of barley. Thrasymedes stood by with a sharp axe to strike down the heifer, and Perseus held the blood bowl. Nestor began the washing of hands and sprinkling of barley, praying hard to Athena as he cut the first hairs from the victim's head and threw them on the fire. These rites done, high-hearted Thrasymedes came up and struck. When the axe severed the sinews of the neck and the heifer collapsed, the women raised the ritual cry. Nestor's daughters, the wives of his sons, and his august wife, Eurydice, eldest of Clymenus' daughters. Then the men raised the heifer's head from the ground and held it for Pisistratus to cut the throat. When the black blood had flowed out and the life left the bones, they butchered the heifer, jointing the thigh pieces in ritual order and covering them with a double layer of fat, and with bits cut raw from the rest of the carcass. These the old man burned on split logs and poured bright wine over them. At his side were young men holding 5 tined forks. When the thigh pieces were burned and the innards tasted, they carved up the rest, skewered the pieces, and roasted them, holding the spits in their hands. Meanwhile, Telemachus was being bathed by Polycaste, Nestor's youngest daughter. When this lovely girl had bathed him, rubbed him with oil, and thrown on his shoulders a tunic and cloak, Telemachus came forth like an immortal god, and took his seat beside Nestor, shepherd of the people. When they had roasted the meat and drawn it off the spits, they sat down and feasted, waited upon by worthy men who poured their wine into golden cups. When they had enough to eat and drink, Gerenian Nestor spoke. "My sons, yoke the combed horses to the chariot, so that Telemachus may begin his journey." He spoke, and they did as he said, quickly yoking the horses. The housekeeper placed in the chariot bread and wine, and the sort of fare kings and lords eat. Telemachus mounted the beautiful chariot, and Pisistratus, Nestor's son, stepped in beside him and took the reins. He flicked the lash, and the horses took off, eating up the plain and leaving behind them the high rock of Pylos. All day long they jostled the yoke that held them together. As the sun set and the world grew dark, they came to Pherae and pulled up at the house of Diocles, son of Ortilochus, himself a son of the river Alpheus. There they spent the night, and Diocles gave them the hospitality due to guests. When dawn brushed the pale sky with rose, they yoked the horses, stepped up into the inlaid chariot, and drove out through the gate and echoing portico. Pisistratus flicked the lash, and the horses took off. When they reached the level, wheat-bearing plains, they kept pushing on, so strong were their horses, until the sun set and the world grew dark.